In the luminous halls of the orbital citadel, Princess Alara moved with the grace of a star drifting through space. Her silver hair reflected the pale light streaming from the observation windows, and her eyes glinted with amusement as she watched her husband, Captain Rian, quietly examining the star charts spread across the metallic table. Unlike the other members of the royal court, who adored the theatrics and flamboyance of the princess, Rian was calm, almost imperceptibly so. His dark uniform was always immaculate, his movements deliberate, and his presence understated. He rarely spoke unless necessary, preferring to observe, to measure, and to plan. Alara tilted her head, her smile teasing, and said, "You stare at those maps as if the stars themselves will whisper their secrets to you. Do you even breathe when you do that, my quiet husband?" Her laughter, musical and sharp, echoed through the chamber, drawing curious glances from the nearby aides. Rian did not respond immediately. He only glanced up, his gaze steady and unyielding, then returned his attention to the charts, tracing imaginary lines with a single finger. The princess raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the effect of her words. "Perhaps you prefer silence to conversation, because you fear your own thoughts," she said lightly, circling the table. "Or maybe you simply enjoy watching me grow restless." Alara's mockery was gentle, but it carried the subtle edge of royalty, testing the patience of a mortal who dared to walk beside her in the cosmic court. Rian finally spoke, his voice low but firm, carrying a resonance that made even the walls feel the weight of his presence. "I observe because I intend to act, not to speak for the sake of noise." The words were few, but in them lay the certainty of someone who had faced chaos and emerged unshaken. The aides exchanged whispers. No one dared speak louder than the captain. Even Alara paused, the faintest trace of surprise flickering across her features. She laughed again, softer this time, leaning over the table to peer at the intricate patterns Rian had traced. "Observe, act, measure," she said, mimicking him, "and yet you sit quietly like a shadow. Are you always so serious, my dear husband?" Her tone was teasing, but there was curiosity behind it. Few had ever dared question the calm exterior of Captain Rian, and even fewer had lived to see his reaction. Rian's hand brushed over the edge of the table, and in a motion so swift it was almost imperceptible. He drew a small ceremonial sword from its scabbard. The steel gleamed under the starlight, a flash of determination that spoke louder than any words could. Alara froze, caught between laughter and alarm, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Her mockery had been harmless until now, until she realized the quiet husband she teased was a man of immense skill and unwavering resolve. "This," Rian said, holding the sword upright, "is not for show. It is for those who forget that even silence can be deadly." The officers in the room straightened, their expressions a mixture of respect and fear. The princess, for all her experience in courtly intrigue and cosmic politics, felt a shiver of unfamiliar admiration. She had played with the calmness of her husband as a cat toys with a creature smaller than itself, never expecting to find the quietude hiding a force capable of commanding the attention of an entire citadel. Alara's lips parted, not in fear but in surprise. "You," she said slowly, "draw a sword as if it is an extension of your thoughts." There was no mockery in her voice now, only recognition, the kind that comes when one sees another in their true form for the first time. Rian nodded slightly, the only sign of acknowledgement he allowed. Then, without lowering the blade, he stepped toward a holographic projection of the nearby planetary system, pointing to one distant moon where a disturbance had been detected. "We cannot afford to wait for threats to come to us," he said, his tone calm but filled with urgency. "If we are to protect this system, we must act before they strike." Alara's heart quickened. The quiet man she had teased so lightly was a strategist, a warrior. and perhaps the only being in the galaxy capable of facing the shadows she herself dared not confront. The princess took a deep breath, regaining her composure, and smiled at Rian with newfound respect. "Then I shall follow you," she said, her voice carrying the command of someone who had learned humility in an instant. "Not as your jest, but as your equal." Rian lowered his sword slowly, acknowledging the promise in her words, but his eyes remained steadfast, watching the projection, calculating. Ready. The preparations began immediately. The orbital citadel buzzed with activity as crew members readied ships, reinforced shields, and ran simulations of possible confrontations. Alara moved beside Rian, observing the meticulous coordination he orchestrated without a single raised voice. His calm presence was magnetic, drawing others to follow not because they feared him, but because they trusted the certainty in his judgment. As they moved to the hangar, Alara could not resist teasing him once more, though her tone carried admiration rather than mockery. "I must confess, Captain, your quiet demeanor hides more than I imagined. The galaxy itself would tremble at your silence." Rian gave her a fleeting glance, one corner of his mouth twitching in what might have been amusement, though he said nothing. Words, he knew, were not always necessary when action spoke more clearly. They boarded a sleek reconnaissance ship, the engines humming with restrained power. Alara observed the controls, noting the efficiency of their design, the precision with which the crew followed Rian's commands. He moved among them like a shadow, unseen yet profoundly felt, correcting minor errors, predicting outcomes, and always maintaining calm. The princess realized that the man she had mocked possessed a mastery of focus that few could comprehend. He had trained not only in combat, but in patience, in observation, and in the art of timing. The journey to the distant moon was tense, but uneventful. Stars streaked past as the ship cut through space, and Alara sat beside Rian, her curiosity finally overtaking her usual playfulness. "Tell me," she said quietly, "why you choose silence over speech." Rian's hand rested lightly on the console, guiding the vessel with steady precision. "Because words are fleeting," he replied, "but action endures. The universe does not heed jest. It responds to purpose." Alara considered his words, feeling their weight in a way she never had before. In court, in diplomacy, in the endless dance of alliances and betrayals, she had relied on charm, on speech, and on wit. Yet here, in the cold expanse of space, she saw the value of quiet resolve. Rian's silence was not emptiness. It was focus, intention, and the readiness to defend not just himself, but the lives of all who depended on him. Their approach to the moon revealed the source of the disturbance, an unregistered vessel, massive and foreboding, hovering just above the surface. Alara's eyes narrowed, sensing danger. Rian's hand moved to the controls, not in haste, but in deliberate preparation. "We will proceed cautiously," he said. "Engagement is only a last resort. Observation first, always." His words were a command that left no room for error. The shuttle descended into orbit, scanning the vessel. The readings were unlike anything they had encountered. Energy signatures fluctuating wildly, hull integrity unknown, and no communication signals. Alara leaned forward, captivated by Rian's methodical approach. Where she would have panicked, he remained composed, analyzing every variable, calculating every possible outcome. Suddenly, the unregistered vessel activated defensive measures. Energy beams arced outward, testing the shields of Rian's ship. Alara instinctively grabbed the edge of her seat, but Rian remained steady, his hands moving over the console with precision. "Divert power to the rear shields," he commanded softly. The crew executed flawlessly. Another arc of energy struck, and the front shield shimmered but held. The calm man, quiet as ever, orchestrated their survival with unspoken authority. Alara felt a surge of admiration she had never known. The man she had once mocked was not only her husband, but a protector of unimaginable skill. His sword, drawn in the hall of the orbital citadel, was more than a symbol. It was a testament to the quiet force within him, the readiness to act when words failed. And now, in the void of space, his actions spoke louder than any jest or sarcasm ever could. Hours passed, filled with tense maneuvers, scanning, and calculated retreats. Eventually, the vessel, unable to match Rion's precision and patience, retreated into the darkness. Alara exhaled, a mixture of relief and awe. Rion sheathed his ceremonial sword, a small smile playing at his lips for the first time. "The threat is gone, for now," he said, calm as ever. "But we remain vigilant." Alara reached over and lightly touched his arm. "You saved more than ships today," she said softly. "You saved respect, honor, and perhaps even me from underestimating the quiet ones." Rion's eyes met hers, and in that gaze she saw not arrogance, not pride, but steadfast commitment, a depth she had only just begun to comprehend as they returned to the orbital citadel. Alara no longer mocked her husband. She had learned a lesson that even royalty could forget, that strength does not always roar, and that true courage often resides in quiet resolve. Captain Rion had drawn his sword, yes, but it was his patience, his strategy, and his unwavering calm that had defended more than just the citadel. He had defended their place in the stars. Together, from that day onward, Alara spoke of her husband with admiration, never again letting the allure of jest obscure the